what I wanted to walk through was a bit about our experience in implementing a Power Platform solution for a federal agency, because I thought we learned a lot during this process that would be valuable to others, not just for implementing Power Platform in the federal space, but also really valuable to implementing Power Platform solutions pretty much in any industry. All right, so I'm going to get this. I debated whether to put this slide at the beginning or at the end, right? So everyone has something about them. I figured I'd put it at the end to get it over with, and also give you a better feel for our perspective and our context. So we're a small business, FI Consulting. We've been around for about 18 years. Half our business in government and commercial. You know, we're a Microsoft ISV partner, CSP partner. And our focus really has been in implementing all sorts of solutions to manage portfolios for financial institutions, banks, and quasi federal financial institutions like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, as well as federal agencies that do lending and grants management. And I say that because I want to give you a little bit of context for this particular solution. So this particular solution for SBA it actually was nominated for an award last year by ACT-IACT for an innovation award. We'll talk to you a little bit about it and about where it's going. So what I want to talk to you about falls into a couple of categories. One is tell you a little bit about the client. I want to tell you a little bit about the program, what they do, you know, how they help, how they work, the business challenge, the solution, how we solved it or are solving it. But then I want to talk a little bit about some of the constraints and challenges to implementing in that particular environment, and as well as some lessons learned from that. We will show you a couple of things. I've actually invited Cassandra LaForest to join, who will, if we have time, will show you the application itself. There are nuances to the application and what we had to do to develop it that are worth highlighting. So let's talk about the client. So I'll ask a question to everybody. Who can tell me what these companies have in common? Anyone?
Customers?
International?
Every one of these customers have gotten an SBA loan to start out. Every one of these companies started out or had an SBA loan, Small Business Administration loan, to help really start and grow their business. Right, so it's a pretty good success rate when you think about it. The Small Business Administration, for those of you that aren't aware, really is focused on furthering small business in the United States, right? So it does that in a number of different ways. One is it has a whole set of programs associated with enabling small businesses to do contracting with the federal government. So it's helping small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses put together what they need to have, put in place what they need to have to do business with the federal government. They have other groups that do small business consulting, but a large part of what they do is lending, loan programs for small businesses to help them get started, to in some cases some programs for small business emergencies. And for those of you who aren't aware, the SBA actually got given, they were given the very difficult task to administer the Paycheck Protection Program, which may or may not have heard of. which is a huge program, mostly because of the relationships they have with small business lenders. It's not really an SBA initiated program. It's something they were, it was turned over to them to actually administer. So Small Business Administration is the customer here. Within Small Business Administration, I'll talk about what this group does. There's a number of different groups within the organization, but our direct customer is the Office of Credit Risk Management. And their job is to look at all the different loans and really assess the quality and risk of SBA's loan portfolio. And I'll just give you a little bit of insight into what that really is all about in just a bit. They provide oversight of SBA loans, lenders, and other investment partners, and they're really in business to educate lenders and manage relationships with lenders to make sure this whole program works well. And there are a number of different programs. The program that we're going to focus on here is their flagship 7A program. 7A, mostly has to do with the legislation, I believe, that that funded the program. But we're talking about a large volume of loans that are managed on an annual basis, right? And every one of the companies here has received a 7A loan in their infancy that helped them grow. So the purpose really is to help fund and subsidize lending so that these companies can get access, easy access to inexpensive capital to grow their business. Okay. All right. So just to give you a high-level view of how the program works. So yes, for the 7A program, SBA really doesn't loan money themselves. What they do is they guarantee loans, right? So small businesses borrow money from lenders, and without these small business loans, they would pay much higher interest. They would have a harder time getting access to capital because they may not, they may not qualify for some of the loans. They may not have enough collateral to put down. What the SBA does is they say, look, we want small businesses we want to grow small businesses. And so we're going to make it easy for them to access capital. And what they say is that, look, for any small business, for a lender that signs up and is a partner of ours, you, Mr. Lender, can give a loan to you, Miss Small Business, at a much lower rate because we're going to guarantee that loan. So if that small business goes under, SBA is responsible for incurring the loss, not the lender. Okay, so the lender can give a loan at a much, really very little risk to the small business, which means they can charge much lower interest, and the threshold for giving that loan is a little bit less in terms of what collateral the small business has, how profitable they are. Okay, so what's happening is that the SBA is really incurring the risk or taking on the risk through the guarantee and subsidizing much lower interest rate loans and many more loans than would be issued to small businesses. Okay. Well, what that means is that SBA is carrying the risk. They're responsible for carrying the risk. They're responsible for making sure they understand at all times how much risk they're really carrying in their loan portfolio. That's a lot of billions of dollars worth of loans that have some degree of risk associated with them. So they have to review a select number of loans and lenders to make sure that, first of all, the lenders were compliant. There's certain rules and regulations that lenders have to go through to vet the small businesses. There's documentation they have to put together. They have to make sure that the lender is looking out for fraud, looking at, is the business real? There's a lot of different things that they have to check. They have to check whether the lender is looking out for borrower compliance. Is the borrower a real business? Is the borrower fill out the forms correctly? All of those things. Was the borrower eligible? Okay, should it have gotten the loan to begin with? right? Is it a real business? Is it owned by a large business and shouldn't really be considered a small business? And then related to all that, they have to be able to assess the overall risk of the loan and SBA's portfolio of loans, as well as lender risk. Are certain lenders more risky than others, right? So, and sometimes action has to be taken against lenders. Lenders get dropped from the program. They don't get, there's certain fees that they would normally get that they lose or have to pay back. So, this is an pretty important function, and without it, the SBA is not able to afford to guarantee as many loans. So basically, when this risk they're guaranteeing, if this risk gets to be higher than expected, that's money out of that really is money out of the budget that they can use to give more loans. Everyone kind of clear on that? All right, so the business challenge, right? So SBA, they need to review these loans. However, SBA historically, or at least near history, has outsourced this function. So they've had contractors doing the review function because they haven't had the resources and necessarily the expertise to do the reviews in enough, in the volume they need to do it. They wanted to bring it in-house, in particular for very targeted and specific reviews. And instead of using contractors to do it, they wanted to build their own team. They wanted to streamline the whole function and gain better visibility and transparency into their whole loan portfolio. So the challenges are there are a lot of external contractors currently there that have that are rolling off. They didn't have a system, right? So this has been an outsourced function, and as an outsourced function, they really didn't have any system to track their loan reviews. They let the contractors use their own systems. By not having a system, they also had limited historical data because they didn't always get to keep the data that the reviewers had captured on reviews, right? So historically, they may not know that a lender is making the same mistakes over a decade, for example, if you have contractors that had turned over. Another challenge is really kind of complex, and the processes are both complex and evolving. And as I mentioned, it's a whole newly hired user team that has to use a whole new system. So when I talk about process complexity, I think it's important to point out what I mean by that. So when you think about a review, it's not just looking at a document and determining whether everything was filled out correctly. There are actually 6 different types of reviews that they do, from full reviews to very specific targeted reviews, ad hoc targeted reviews. For example, they find out that lenders there's a big push to there's a big push for mergers and acquisitions. Well, they have to do specialty reviews to make sure they understand how that changes the risk of a certain lender if they bought another lender, and how that affects the risk of those particular loans that are going to the new lender. In addition, there are well over 15 separate review areas that they look at. Everything from ownership. Was there a third party involved with the loan? Who's servicing the loan? Whether ownership of the borrower has multiple levels, for example, so you can trace it down to a certain person who may have multiple loans out there because they own a whole bunch of small businesses. So there are what they call SOPs, or standard operating procedures, and this is about a 450 page document that guides all the things that guides the whole program. But a lot of that is about how they actually do these reviews. And frankly, part of the goal was to take the areas of those areas of those SOPs and systematize it. That's what the system really is doing. More importantly, the SOPs change. So I think they're on version K or at this point, and they change every couple of years. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you're reviewing a loan that was done on an older SOP, the rules that were in place at the time that loan was made are the ones that are the ones you have to follow. So if you're doing a loan review, you will review an older loan differently than you're going to review a newer loan, and the system has to take that into consideration. Okay, I'm not going to get into all of this, but the system really needed to be capable of doing a lot of different things, but all the things you think about: adaptable, extensible, scalable, but it also had to be FedRAMP certified and compliant, because this ended up being SBA's first first cloud implementation of a Dynamics system. So the solution was the loan review tool, and this may go without saying, but really the whole purpose of this was to streamline. This is what it does: streamlines the review process, standardizes functions, increases flexibility to adapt, producing reports, official documents, but also it's not just, again, reports and official documents. I mean, the documents it's producing are not letters. The documents it's producing are actually legal correspondence telling a lender that they have to fix a problem. Okay, and there are ramifications to getting that wrong. So they really wanted to get better data, handle their data and transparency and program insight. Okay, those are words. What I'd like to actually do is take a second and interrupt this regularly scheduled program to turn it over to Cassandra LaForest, who is going to kind of just show you a couple of things about the solution, and then we'll get into some of the unique aspects of implementing this.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly show you guys, and then Rob, cut me off as soon as you want to end the time. All the things that Rob talked about, I'm just going to quickly show you what it looks like in LRT. Starting with just this Power BI dashboard, that this is kind of like a management level view. One of the reviews that Rob was discussing, we call them Form 159 reviews. And this is a lender-based review. So if SBA decides, we need to go review this lender, they choose a sample of loans. And with those loans, there's a sample or a collection of Form 159s. When a borrower applies for an SBA loan through a lender, they might use outside sources. So they could use any number of entities or firms to help them package up a loan application. And when they do that, and when SBA initiates the review of the lender, they have to complete this Form 159. And this kind of tells us, or tells SBA, the basis of the loan, how it was packaged, and really importantly, like how much that entity charged both the applicant or the borrower and the lender. And what Rob was saying, that those SOPs, so they change, it's a huge document. Everything that has to do with the loan review is based on that 400+ page document. So in one of the SOPs, it could be that the loan number has to be 10 digits and there can be no letters, no dashes, no anything else. And so when we're reviewing these Form 159s, if one of these loan numbers has a dash, then it's an exception finding. And that we call it exception findings. And this is something I'll go into a little bit more detail, but Aiden helped us out and built a wonderful, wonderful feature that we validate all these loans, and it generates a number of exception findings, so a number of errors that the lender needs to review. So this is just a quick dashboard, what we call kind of a management level view. And now we're going to go into this lender entity. So this is all fake data. This is my bank that I created. The only thing real here, I guess, is my zip code. So now you guys all know where I live. going off of what Rob said, that this system, it is encompassing a lot of different programmatic areas within this Office of Credit Risk Management, which we refer to as OCRM. And so some of them are lender-based reviews, some of them are loan-based reviews, some of them are just granting or renewing a lender's authority to originate SBA loans. So there's a lot of different functionalities and a lot of different program areas that we need to build into this system. But everyone needs this nice little lender page. From here, so we see this is Bank of Cassandra, which is me, the lender ID number. And I set up a few of these, again, all fake data. And we're going to open up this first one. So these 3 loan reviews are loans that were generated from this bank, so Bank of Cassandra. And when we open up this first one, so this whole page is just information about this loan. So the borrower name, this is Cassie's dog, Tank, which if you do hear snoring in the background, that is my dog Tank, who's snoring at my feet. And all of this information is just, so again, general loan information. One of the most important pieces that kind of dictates this entire review process is this SOP version. And we do have a few different SOPs built in here. They did just update, again, 5010.6 a few months ago. We're going to do the 5010K. This SOP version is what dictates kind of this, so this validate findings button, which internally we refer to as the Aiden button. This is what,
or the Aiden Easy button.
The Aiden Easy button. Yeah, so we owe a lot of gratitude over to Aiden. And what this tells us is, again, like the rules that are assigned to this loan. So this loan was approved on yesterday, which means that it's actually, it would be for the other SOP version. But again, this is all fake data. Before I show you a little bit more, I wanted to show kind of the back end of this, these error, the SOP versions. So they are connected to errors. So one of the ones that I talked about earlier, right now, this loan number has to be 10 digits, no letters, no symbols, no emojis, whatever else you could add in there. And that's all the SOPs, but if that changed, then this error code might change. So we have 3 in here for error code 159 for 159 reviews, for that error code 159111. It's connected to this corrective action that, so this is the loan number 1, but this is what appears in that like federally regulated mandated report that generates from LRT, gets sent to the lender, and it's a pretty important document, which I think, again, Aiden could talk to, because we send him frequent emails of pretty immediate changes that we need now, because maybe they see a comma that's in the wrong place. Anyway, so that's what this back end is doing.
So if I could,
yeah.
Just to highlight what Cass is showing. So one of the design principles was, again, to maintain flexibility as the requirements change, and to be able to tie it to the SOP. So this is what you're really seeing is, in effect, it's our error code table. So we made as much of this table driven as possible, so that if the messages change, if the guidance changes, if the SOP version changes, we can update this without having to change code, right? So you still have to have the code, find the triggers, but everything else, the actual messaging and all that is tied to the SOP version. Even the code is tied to the SOP version, of course, but so it's all scalable as the program changes.
And so going off of that, where these error codes are identified is this fee form that we have, that it's a series of true and false questions that based on what you respond for question. One of the questions, you might have a specific question that comes next. And so all of those error codes are conditional if statements. If answer to this is true, but then the selection is correct. If that's false, then that's, error code 1, etc. And so we wanted to make this as foolproof as possible. So if you're having a new staff come on, this is a straightforward, you don't need to know a lot about the program, about SBA, about what it is that you're looking at. It's just very quick questions of like, do you see that the agent address is entered? Yes or no. After we generate that, this is what drives those findings. This is what's important to that report. And this, so I completed 2 for this bar or Cassie's dog tank. We're going to click the magic Aiden button.
What are you doing? Oh, you're doing it there. I thought you were going to do it from the lender.
I can go do it from the lender too.
Because Aiden hasn't even seen that part yet.
Oh.
I don't think I've shown him this.
All right, then so there's 2 ways you can validate these findings, and depending on the programmatic staff, some people do it by loan. The other cool way that I think Rob figured out is how to do it. We call it like mass validation. So these 3 loans are for the Bank of Cassandra, which is my bank. Different loans. They all have a number of, so 3 loan sample, but they all have a number of 159s, which is that, if you hired an entity to help with the SBA loan packaging. So what we did is on our little, what we call the ellipses, you can validate the findings, so press the magic Aiden button for all of the loans at one time. We have 2 different ones for generate active, which just means redo all the findings for all the loans, and then the other option is the changes only. So if you did the loans, you generated the findings, but then you went back, you updated something, you could press the other one, which saves you a little bit of time. So once this, yes, we do get that message in this environment. But so what that means is we generated all the findings for here. After this step is when we run this report that we also owe a lot of gratitude and thanks to Aiden for. This is the report that SBA uses as a binding document. You generate it exactly from LRT. The objective is to be absolutely perfect, so it can just be immediately sent to the lender. So other than, if you filling this in, so Rob, his number, and then we get to, there's 2 very complicated features of this form. We have 2 different sets of tables. This first table, which has all the loans, a few pieces of information for them, but this table is sorted, the first level of sort is by the sample number, which is when you are completing these loan reviews, each one of these loans has a sample number tied to it. You complete over here. So number 1, so this Cassie's dog tank, that's what you see as the first one. When you go down, so these are the aggregated corrective actions or errors that we found when completing this review in a summary page. And then the next level of tables is each individual loan with that agent. So the lender could be one of the agents. This is, my dog's a Boston Terrier, so this is the third-party agent, and the different set of findings associated to that agent's, that Form 159. Rob, is there anything else I should point out on
No,
that?
I think that's fine. I think, so, and I know Aiden can talk more about the complexities, why we simply couldn't get this to work with the normal, the normal word templates would not work with this. Just enough complexity of how we're producing the tables, how we're producing the, because again, we're generating all of this, there's, all these validations are happening. We have an exceptions table, so that we have a findings table, or subgrid on every loan review that kind of attaches findings for everyone. We had to actually compile all of them, so that will not repeat. If you have multiple loan reviews, you're not going to want to repeat the same findings 3 times in this document. You want to summarize and only produce it once. But you want to make sure that it's clear that that the problem exists and you looked at multiple loans here. So that's really it. The other thing that I'll mention is, and we don't have to show it, but there's a lot of cross-validation that happens with this. So you're doing specific reviews, but if you're doing a full review, you're checking whether an answer on one of these forms is consistent with the answer on other forms, so that you can make sure that the entire package is consistent across the board, and that's when it's not, then you have issues. But that's really it. There's probably a million other things we could show you, but I think those are some of the key things. I'll kind of jump back to make sure I can get into, unless there's something else, Cassie, you were
no.
Yeah. So most everyone has seen, a lot of the stuff is stuff that we would normally be doing, right, as part of any one of these types of Power Platform implementations. But those are some of the unique things. So to kind of review the design principles, a couple of things we had to do. One is we had limited access to our customer, but we had to use get them engaged as much and as often as possible. We had an agile iterative development process. In fact, we did it weekly, so we had weekly sprints, and we did that because we really need to stay. So they needed a quick implementation, and we needed to keep them engaged. We couldn't wait 2 weeks and have our client not be available for a meeting that could put us off another 2 weeks. So we really worked ourselves more aggressively. Again, guided form by form review. So when you do this form to form, it's almost like TurboTax in a way, in that fields appear based on answers to prior fields in some of these forms to support inexperienced users. This is really a client requirement. Client wanted us to capture all of the data that we could, because the data was important, rather than just saying yes, no, and let the system evaluate for issues, as opposed to making a reviewer make a decision about whether a loan was good or not. So because of that, there's a lot of back-end comparisons and analysis. Again, the flexibility we mentioned and extensibility to other loan types. Another interesting thing is that you'll see some of the things we've done are actually may seem a little bit backdated, if you will. We had to design this. We had some issues, not issues, but there were different factions within the customer as to whether they wanted to have it be cloud or on-premise, and they couldn't make a decision until close to implementation. And so because of that, we had to design this to the lowest common denominator so that it could be implemented on-premise if necessary. All right, so project constraints. Again, this was their first Dynamics / PowerPoint Power Platform implementation. So while they had done Dynamics, it's the first one they'd done for the cloud. A lot of attention was placed on it. Limited client availability, I mentioned. They're overworked incredibly there. So we really had to kind of use the time as wisely as possible. And we ended up knowing that and having to know that SOP as well as the client did. Multiple stakeholders, turf sensitivities, long history. So we run into this a lot, where you have a client or program or customer group that has its own IT organization and has to go up against the centralized CIO for decisions about how things get done. And in this case, there were long histories of the business unit IT group not being able to do the things they needed to do to support their customers because of restrictions that were placed on them. So that was one of the issues with the cloud, with deciding whether to go to the cloud or not, because the CIO owned the cloud. not the business unit organization. So timeline, very aggressive. I said iterative sprints. We actually went from prototype to production ready in 6 months. And the only thing that delayed us was that they hadn't acquired the licenses. So we would have actually been live even earlier. In production, multiple iterations since releases since, expanding both in terms of capabilities and functions that we're performing, as well as the potential to use it for other things. In fact, without saying too much more, there is a huge SBA program right now where we're actually implementing a soup to nuts compliance capability that does everything from data analytics and Azure machine learning to identify loans to target, uses it's using cognitive services to take data off of documents, and forms recognizer and everything, to manage a huge volume of loans. Lots of continued expansion. So lessons learned. How am I doing on time? I've got 1 minute. Lessons learned. Okay, first of all, technology is really important, but business and domain knowledge is really critical here. So we really, without a large client team, we really had to learn their what they do as quickly as possible. And the good news is that this is our business, right? We understand how financial organizations work, and lending organizations work, for example. So in that business and domain knowledge can really drive success in a low-code environment. I mean, you've seen the same articles we have. This is kind of the rebirth of the business consultant, who can also be a technical consultant. We've seen this in spades. Low code can be a blessing and a curse. Low code gets things done quickly. Clients start to expect that things can get done quickly, and they start expecting corners to be cut. So it can be a challenge with low code to come around and make sure you enforce the same degree of structure that you really need to ensure the quality that you need, and that you're not constantly chasing yourself. Number 3, users change everything. Developing, what we learned, as you all have learned, that developing new functionality with clients already using the system just adds a whole other new layer of complexity, kind of like, as they say, trying to change the engine of an airplane while it's still in flight. Makes things harder. We've had to adapt, adjust, put the right things in place to make sure that we can manage quality, and work at the same fast pace that we work. Plan for FedRAMP earlier. It's not a huge hurdle. It's an important hurdle, and you need to find ways to leverage what exists. A lot of agencies have Dynamics implementations, but they may not have cloud implementations. They may have Dynamics on the cloud, but they don't have Power Platform on the cloud. You need to leverage it, and I'm happy to talk with anyone about what we did and how that worked. But we were able to leverage early work that the agency had done to prepare for using Dynamics to help our program. Really, what's in a name? There's actually a couple pieces to this. One is Dynamics versus Power Platform. We found this in a number of agencies, not just SBA. Microsoft, of course, we all know how they always keep changing the name of almost everything. Hint, hint, Dataverse. Sometimes you want to stay current. Sometimes you want to use what's there. So we found in some agencies, they're afraid of Power Platform, or it's new, or they're not sure it's FedRAMP compliant, but Dynamics is known. That's the way they think of things, and you can talk about Dynamics as being the platform you're developing on. For some clients, Dynamics can be a bad word if they're a Salesforce shop and all they think about is Dynamics as a CRM system and not as Power Platform as a low-code platform. Similarly, one of the things that we did early on that had a huge impact was we didn't call this the loan review system. We called it the loan review tool. Okay, and that sounds kind of understated given what the complexity that you saw, but just the benefit of that created the perception that this isn't, that this isn't a huge system that requires, total new FedRAMP, boundaries and all of that. It was, it was portrayed, I think, and at the time it was meant as a tool. It was an iterative process, but it's become a major thing, a major system that's scalable and will grow. But if we called it a system, there would have been a lot more hurdles, attention, and a lot more roadblocks. Finally, who owns the cloud? And this is, I could talk for a whole session on this. The wonders of the cloud and low code in empowering business organizations to build systems that meet their needs is a great thing, except when CIO organizations may have different feelings about who actually owns the cloud and the relationship and the software that's developed. And there is this push-pull, and it's not just about the cloud, it's the same thing. You've seen this with different names. You've seen it with server consolidation. You've seen it with way back in the days of data centers, and there's always this constant ebb and flow between local, business-based technology or business unit-based technology and centrally developed technology, and it will continue on. The cloud doesn't necessarily solve that. Sometimes it can make it, it can be an avenue for centralizing and taking away power as opposed to empowering business units if not implemented right. And with that, a little bit over, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're not overtime, Rob. We have allocated until 7 o'clock, so you have 10 whole minutes for questions.
Oh, well, okay, that sounds great. And in fact, I want to hear questions, but I can also give you this just for fun. I said we were up for a, wait, hold on. Sorry, I don't have sound on, but we were up for nominated for an award, and I am going to share this video. That's actually a nice way to end this, given that we have time.
Every day, Americans around the nation are realizing their dreams by starting businesses that transform communities, provide new opportunities, and inspire growth across generations. The Small Business Administration serves to support the dreams of small business owners. In 2019, SBA approved 51,000 7A loans for small businesses. These small businesses need SBA support now more than ever before, requiring SBA to adapt to meet this increased demand. FI Consulting was proud to help SBA and its Office of Credit Risk Management rise to this challenge by helping them revolutionize how they review loans. SBA needed a review platform to maximize review efficiency, support a geographically dispersed workforce, and enhance program transparency and analytics to identify program trends, performance, and changes. That solution was the Loan Review Tool, LRT. LRT instilled greater efficiency, accuracy, and consistency into SBA's loan review process while providing the analytical power to identify trends and changes. LRT's efficiency gains enabled SBA to eliminate its reliance on contractors to perform reviews.
LRT's user-friendly interface lowered the experience level needed to process reviews. We built a simplified TurboTax-like question and answer interface to expedite data capture.
LRT's automated validation features instantly check data and flag loans for discrepancies or elevated risk based on configurable rules set by SBA. The result is increased accuracy and consistency of loan reviews and a reduction in review times for individual loans. LRT was built on Microsoft's low-code, no-code Power Platform to accelerate development while maximizing system flexibility and user experience.
We worked hand in hand with the Small Business Administration following an aggressive schedule of 1 to 2 week sprint iterations. The adaptability of the Power Platform enabled FI Consulting to quickly embed SBA credit policy into the workflows and business rules that guide reviewers through the loan review process.
LRT made SBA's 7A loan review process faster, cheaper, and better. But most importantly, LRT helps SBA continue to deliver on its promise to help Americans start and grow their businesses, which comprise the backbone of the American economy.
Just kind of gets me right here. All right, now questions.
Aiden, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did on the magic buttons and things, and where the kind of cliffs were?
Yeah, so there were a few different approaches with that that we took throughout the course of the project. At first it was, we'll just do it with a workflow. When you enter some data, we can validate it. But that hit some challenges, because especially as the rules got more and more complex, obviously you have the built-in limitations with the workflows, but then it just became a lot to manage. So how we ended up implementing that was, I'm a developer, but particularly I'm fluent with C#. So I wrote a custom workflow activity for that, basically to do all the validation for a lender. So it would get called from an action, and then the action's invoked from JavaScript on the form. So you click the button, fires off some JavaScript to run the action. The action calls the custom code. The action calls the custom code, and then custom code updates the records and returns the result to the viewer. So it's a little bit of a convoluted process in a way. But what obviously what the user sees is they click the button, they get the notification bar at the top of the record. So that sits for about 8 seconds. As those records are created and deactivated in the background, then the message goes away and the results grid is refreshed. So we're never deleting any of those past errors. We're deactivating them to kind of get them out of that front of mind view. But so that's how we implemented that.
So then you have like an audit history of what happened.
Right. Yeah. So we always have a picture of what, everything that ever came up as part of this evaluation. But we have a focus on the the current outstanding items.
Nice.
Other quick question. So we saw your model-driven app and we saw Power BI, but were there any other Power Platform tools that were used behind the scenes?
Well, of course, so we use Power Automate for a number of the flows, and we started off with. So first of all, it's this is pure model-driven, so we're not using any. While the customer has Dynamics installed, we're not using any reserved entities, so it's all model-driven that way. We had to start with workflows as opposed to flows because, as I mentioned, the design consideration we had to we had to originally design so that it could be implemented on premise, and so we couldn't build flows in there. In a future iteration, we're probably going to consider embedding a Canvas app to really expedite the review process, make it be even more TurboTax-like. But we obviously could not do anything like that early on. So in our other iteration for this larger program, we're actually doing some logic apps. We're doing we're probably going to have UI flow for some RPA embedded there. We're actually using a lot more Azure related stuff because of the sheer volume. So a lot of the cognitive services, a lot of the form recognizer, we're not using the Power App stuff. We're using, we're going straight to Azure for some of that.
I am Dimitri from Montreal.
Yep.
Was there a lot of training involved, or it went pretty smoothly? Oh,
You want to talk to that, Cassie? There was plenty of training. We actually went to the extent that we could. We tried to do a lot of one-on-one work to get them used to it, because what Cassie learned is that not only are not all users equal in terms of reviews, but not all users are equal in terms of computer literacy. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Cassie.
Yeah, we did a lot of training, and half the training was a lot of the validations that Aiden built out. It was like, this is why this error appears, but then some of the other training was just figuring out how to copy and paste URLs into your URL search bar, and how to how to save certain things. So there was a lot of training involved that's still ongoing. We keep our communication channel open all day with both our SBA machines, talking to them, answering questions. And a lot of the frustrations I think that we've come across is just getting to know the system and knowing the tips and tricks and knowing how to get the results that you're looking for. So yes, lots and lots of training.
the user is always different from one user to the next. I didn't catch the beginning. Did you move from a different legacy system to this system, or was it an in-house transition?
So it's actually, they didn't have a system because it's a function that had been outsourced to contractors. So that was the biggest issue, is that they didn't have, not only did they not have a system, but they were hiring all new staff.
So it's kind of a greenfield, but with a lot of business experience.
Yep.
One other quick question, which was how many hours did it take? So I think you said it was 6 months to deliver the whole solution, but do you know how many hours that equates to?
I don't. If someone wants to follow up with me, I can try and look at that. I can tell you that we were pretty lean in how we did this, right? We kept a very lean team one of the ways that is kind of my pet thing is that I kind of believe in having people do as many different things as they can. So we would do things like for each release, like one person, one or two people were responsible for development. The other person might be responsible for testing and functionality, and someone else may be doing dashboards, and we would rotate that as much as possible so that everyone kind of had a chance to do it. But everyone really worked together on as much of this as possible. Aiden's been in enough of those meetings to see everyone shows up. It's Aiden time.